In July 2018, a group of tourists arrived in Branson, Missouri. Part of their visit included one of the city's most recognizable tours, a ride on an amphibious duck boat, a vehicle that could drive on land and float in water. But only minutes after the boat entered the water, a sudden storm swept across the lake, and the duck boat was quickly overwhelmed and plunged beneath the surface. Branson, Missouri is one of the Midwest's busiest tourist destinations, and the city draws millions of visitors each year. Among its attractions was Ride the Ducks, a tour company that used amphibious vehicles to take guests through the city streets and then onto the water. The water portion of the tours took place on Table Rock Lake, a reservoir created when the White River was dammed in the 1950s. The lake covers more than 40,000 acres and extends across southern Missouri into northern Arkansas with nearly 800 miles of shoreline. Surrounded by the wooded hills of the Ozarks, it is a popular spot for fishing, boating, and recreation. The geography also means that storms moving across the region can quickly turn calm water into hazardous conditions. Ride the Ducks Branson was a familiar part of the city's tourism industry. The attraction had operated since the 1970s, giving short tours that combine local history with a quick cruise near the shore. By 2018, the Branson fleet was owned and operated by Ripley Entertainment, the same company behind Ripley's Believe It or Not attractions. The vehicle used on the duck tours was a DUKW, a type of amphibious craft built in 1942 during World War II. These vehicles were essentially modified military trucks fitted with a watertight hull and a propeller designed to travel both on land and in water. The original purpose was to carry personnel, equipment, and supplies from ships to beaches or to cross rivers and small bodies of water during amphibious operations. The DUKW was intended as a temporary wartime transport tool, not a long-term passenger vessel. The duck boat assigned to this tour was called Stretch Duck 7. It had been lengthened and modified for sightseeing, measuring about 33 feet. It carried a fixed metal canopy overhead and a plastic side curtains that could be lowered. Safety gear included bilge pumps, alarms, and racks of life jackets mounted above the seats. That afternoon, Stretch Duck 7 was scheduled to take passengers on a combined land and water route. Normally, the tour began on land before moving into the lake, but on this trip, the order was changed. The ride would start directly on the water. For those boarding, it was expected to be a routine, lighthearted experience lasting less than an hour. On board were 31 people, 29 passengers and 2 crew members. The captain handled the boat on the water and provided narration, while a second employee, the driver for the land portion, rode as a passenger once the boat entered the lake. Earlier in the day, the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm watch for the region. At 6:32 p.m., just before boarding, that watch was upgraded to a warning for Table Rock Lake. The approaching storm was later identified as a part of a derecho, a long, fast-moving line of severe thunderstorms that can stretch for hundreds of miles. Unlike a tornado, which is violent but localized, a derecho produces widespread straight-line winds that can last for hours and often reach hurricane strength. They can topple trees, damage buildings, and create dangerous conditions on open water. On July 18th, the derecho swept through southern Missouri in less than an hour. Weather stations in Springfield and Branson airports recorded gusts above 70 miles per hour. On Table Rock Lake, the short fetch meant waves build up quickly and steeply, striking harder than rolling swells. For a low-riding amphibious craft with low reserve buoyancy, those short, sharp waves pose a serious hazard. As passengers boarded, the captain delivered a standard safety briefing. He pointed out exits, indicated where the life jackets were stored overhead, and described where life rings were located. But passengers were not required to wear life jackets. At around 6:55 p.m., Stretch Duck 7 entered the water using the ramp beside the showboat Branson Belle, a large paddle wheeler often docked at the same facility. The first minutes were calm. Children were allowed brief turns at the helm, a customary part of the ride. Then, conditions began to worsen. The approaching winds turned ripples into whitecaps in moments. The captain lowered the side curtains to keep water from blowing in and turned the boat toward the nearest exit ramp rather than continuing the longer scenic route. From the paddle wheeler nearby, observers saw the duck boat maintaining a steady course toward the shore. Another company boat that had entered shortly before took a sharper, faster run and reached the ramp ahead of the worst conditions. Inside Stretch Duck 7, passengers at the rear began noticing water coming in. A bilge alarm sounded and water pooled at their feet. Water driven over the bow entered the hull through a forward air intake hatch that wasn't weathertight for conditions like these. As the duck boat rode lower, additional water came aboard more easily. The boat continued toward the ramp, but flooding outpaced what the pumps could handle. Water inside rose rapidly, and the vessel settled stern first. Rescue calls were made quickly. Crew and passengers on the showboat Branson Belle threw life rings into the water and helped pull survivors aboard. Local deputies, fire crews, EMS, and marina staff moved toward the scene. Tia Coleman, traveling with her family, recalled that the captain had pointed out the life jackets but told passengers they wouldn't need them. When water started rushing in, reaching up to the life jackets was no longer doable. She remembered the boat tilting hard, a strong wave crashing over the side, and the cabin filling so quickly that people began shouting and pushing toward any opening they could find. Some tried to grab children and lift them higher, others struggled against the closed side curtains as the water climbed. Amid the chaos, Coleman and her 13-year-old nephew managed to get free, though 9 of her relatives did not. Other survivors described the same sense of sudden panic. A teenager, Lauren Smith, made it out alive. When the boat went under, she lost sight of her father and brother in the rush of water. Pulled beneath the surface, she blacked out for a moment before regaining consciousness underwater. With the cabin flooding and the canopy overhead, she couldn't turn back to reach anyone else. Her only option was to swim upward, pushing her way through the rising water until she broke into the open air. Carried by the waves toward the dock, she was pulled to safety by someone on shore. Lauren survived, but her father and brother did not. What made escape so difficult for many was the boat's fixed canopy and plastic curtains. As the vessel sank, the roof acted like a barrier that trapped passengers inside, while the lowered curtains blocked side exits. People who might have swum free in open boat were instead caught beneath the structure as the cabin filled. One moment families were sitting shoulder to shoulder, listening to the driver narrating the city's history, and the next they were fighting rising water, trying to tear open curtains or push toward the exits. What had felt like a routine tour suddenly became a frantic struggle for survival. Stretch Duck 7 sank before it could reach the ramp. The duck boat sank 80 feet underwater, only a few hundred feet from shore. 14 people survived. 17 people, including the driver, Robert Williams, lost their lives. Investigators later pieced together how the accident unfolded. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the boat should never have gone out once a severe thunderstorm warning was in effect. When the derecho hit, waves forced water in through a hatch at the bow. Without extra flotation built into the hull, the boat couldn't stay on the surface once it flooded. The canopy and plastic curtains then became deadly obstacles, trapping many passengers inside. A manager at the company had instructed crews to start with the water portion that evening, placing Stretch Duck 7 on the lake just as the storm line arrived. Company policies had set limits for wind and waves, but those rules weren't enforced. This was not the first deadly duck boat incident. The vulnerabilities identified in this accident had been seen before. In May 1999, a duck boat named Miss Majestic sank on Lake Hamilton in Arkansas. 13 passengers drowned when the vessel went under in less than a minute. The investigation into the disaster identified 2 critical issues: insufficient reserve buoyancy and fixed canopies that trapped passengers as the cabin flooded. The board recommended adding enough flotation so a swamped vessel would remain afloat, and addressing canopy designs that restricted escape. After the 1999 report, some operators made changes, but the recommendations were not widely implemented across all fleets. Nearly 2 decades later, the Table Rock Lake sinking showed that the same design vulnerabilities still existed in multiple operations using the DUKW style boat. After the incident, Congress directed the Coast Guard to toughen safety rules for amphibious tour boats. In 2023, new requirements were rolled out. One change targeted the canopies. Investigators had long warned that fixed roof could trap people inside, so the new rules now require canopies to be removed or redesigned. If a boat runs without one, passengers must wear life jackets while on the water. Operators are also required to add flotation so that even if the hull floods, the boat stays on the surface long enough for people to escape. Bilge pumps and alarms must be improved to catch flooding sooner, and openings in the hull must be sealed or reinforced to keep water out. The captain of the Stretch Duck 7 and 2 company supervisors all face charges. At the federal level, prosecutors filed dozens of counts, but in 2020, a judge dismissed the case after ruling that Table Rock Lake is not a navigable waterway under federal law. That ruling was upheld on appeal in 2023. In Missouri, state prosecutors later charged the 3 men with involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. Those charges were dismissed in 2022, but refiled soon afterward. As of 2025, the state case is still pending and has not yet gone to trial. Ride the Duck Branson never reopened. Ripley Entertainment announced it would permanently shut down the attraction, and the site was later repurposed for another venue. Families of victims and survivors filed wrongful death and personal injury claims against Ripley Entertainment. The company reached confidential settlement in multiple cases. By early 2020, it was confirmed that the last pending lawsuit had been resolved. The accident remained a point of reference in the city, noted for its sudden onset and broad impact on visitors and residents. Duck boat tours still exist in few places, but their popularity has dropped sharply. Years of safety concerns and repeated accidents have left many operators closing or phasing them out, and the attraction that was once common in tourist towns has become far less visible. That's it for the video. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I would really appreciate it if you can support the channel so that one day I can offer you a much better experience. Have a good, wonderful day or night, and I will see you in the next video.